Hi, everybody. This is David Rocco Ficini, and you're listening to the Mo Stop Mo podcast. Today's podcast interview is with Brett Foxwell. I'm happy I got an opportunity to sit down with this wonderful armaturist and animator. If you're not familiar with Brett's work, one of the best examples of what he has out there right now is Fabricated, his personal 10-year project that he worked on, creating the environment and the story and most especially the armatures. Brett's a very interesting guy. He has a scientific mind, he has a creative mind, and it's all melded in this one film. You might also recognize his work in BoxTrolls, the continuation of the Star Wars saga, and also he worked on Phil Tippett's opus, Mad God, which is also a work in progress pending release. Wanted to take this opportunity to give you guys also an update on the Mo Stop Mo Oakland Film Festival. Obviously, during this global pandemic, we have postponed the film festival. We keep kicking the can down the road because we definitely want this to be an in-person festival. But with where we are right now, we're having a hard time reconciling doing that, even with social distancing, because the last thing I would want is this to become something where somebody's going to get sick. So to be honest, we're not quite sure what we want to do with it. We have not necessarily been doing an online festival route like some other fests because we do want to build this creative community. So please just keep on checking in with mostopmo.com, or feel free to reach out to me or our team. Check email info@mostopmo.com if you have any questions about that. Now back to Brett. I'm so excited I got to sit down with Brett, got to pick his brain of how he thinks, how he got started, what his influences are, and why he feels that stop motion is unmistakably human. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Brett Foxwell. All right, it looks like we're recording and everything's here. So first off, thank you, Brett, for joining and being a part of this interview. Everybody, this is Brett Foxwell. He is a very accomplished, in my opinion, armaturist. He's worked on some really cool stuff, and he's been residing in the Bay Area for many years. But we actually I find this very interesting. A lot of stop motion artists that I am talking to do get their start in like Illinois or Chicago. So first off, I'm talking. Hello, Brett.
Hiya. Good to be here.
So thanks again for joining. So what I'd like to do is just kind of jump right in there and say, what are you doing now? Right now, we're in quarantine. This interview is taking place at the beginning of August, and want to know how you're doing with all of that right now.
Doing well. I'm pretty much under full lockdown as well. There's not too much work. I mean, I had been working freelance, and as most everyone knows, just about all the freelance that was out there pretty much dried up. There were a few ongoing projects that are kind of like a little bits happening here and there, and just stuff that can be done from home, like planning and setup and getting supplies set together. A lot of that's still happening, but it's just very much a hiatus.
Uh-huh.
And then on my own, it's kind of the same thing, just like things I needed a big setup for, or a big set. You know, when I shoot something, it just it kind of swallows up all the space that's available. And there's a big animation table with like outriggers attached to it that go off 5 feet in each direction to extend the set. And then there's a backdrop that's the sky or the background or whatever hanging from whatever back wall there is. I haven't really, I'm luckily in the project I'm working on now, I'm in between that. So I'm just doing lots of, I don't need the huge full setup right now, or to go to like another studio and set that up somewhere, which is really difficult to do right now. So luckily I kind of went through and just okay, what are all the, let me do a lot of the building that I'll need when I actually get to this stage of animation later on. So I'm doing a lot of character building. I luckily had also, like, for machining the armatures, I don't really have too much of regular access to a machine shop, but I'd gotten a lot of the building done. So I've been doing a lot of clay sculpting for the silicone skin mold, casting and molding that's going to go, the skin that's going to go on these armatures.
What is this project? What is the project that you're working on right now? Is this the thing I've been seeing on Instagram with the spaceship? I've been seeing some motion control shots with the ship dodging asteroids and stuff like that.
Yeah, it is. It doesn't have a name, doesn't have a title, other than it's just my 10-year animation project number 2.
Yeah, it's like you seem to kind of focus on these 10-year projects, huh?
I mean, I don't want to say focus, because that sounds like I really set out to do this, but I just somehow end up in this situation time and time. This is the second time, but it's been 15 years of it. So my first project was Fabricated, which I started when I was in Chicago, and that ended up taking me about 10 years to finish, and I never meant for it to take that long. I mean, I knew it was, when I was getting started, I knew it was going to be a longer forecast project, a bigger scale of a project, but I had no idea it would have taken 10 years. If I had known that, I would have dropped it and walked away.
So let me rewind a little bit before we go into like Fabricated. So what I understand, you're originally from Chicago or the Chicagoland area?
No, I'm originally from the Northeast. Moved around a lot. I went to college in Boston, and then I lived in Miami for a few years, and then kind of randomly moved to Chicago with some friends, and ended up with a really good job there. I have a mechanical engineering degree, and I've been working kind of as an engineer, kind of as a machinist, because I just really liked being in a machine shop and building things, building things, which was really kind of turned into my forte. And I got this job in Chicago that was supervising a machine shop, and it was still a little bit new to me, but I really quickly just taught myself how to do all the machining techniques and had access to the shop after hours. So everything I had ever had in my head, ever since like I was a little kid, just I think of something, and like a lot of times, like with my father, I'd ask him like, "Oh, well, I want to, machine a chess set out of brass or steel." It's like, "Oh, you need a lathe to do that, or you need a milling machine to do that."
So, like, what age are you asking your father these type of questions? Like,
this
obviously has this.
This was 7 or 8.
So you come from this background. Your father was like a machinist, or was he a woodworker? Or
no, he was a bit of a woodworker. He was just a jack of all trades, master of none. But he was also very, very much a builder and a tinkerer. But no, the thing we never had access to was a proper machine shop. And even like in high school,
to get access to that. Yeah,
I remember hearing about like other schools that had shop class. It's like, what's that? Like my high school didn't have any kind of a shop class. And even in college at engineering, they used to. I mean, I feel like I came through it at the wrong point in history. Like 20, 30 years before I was at college was kind of the end of when they would teach mechanical engineers. Like, I mean, all mechanical engineers just knew how to go to a machine shop, use a milling machine, use a lathe, even if it wasn't part of their ultimate job description. It was considered to be just foundational skills. And I think by the time I was in mechanical engineering in college, they had kind of
it's almost like they parsed that out to trade schools now. It wasn't a higher education program any longer. Yeah.
And not that you want to hire a mechanical engineer to go machine stuff, but the thing I noticed that, I mean, it was something that affected, I mean, I feel bad in saying this. A lot of the engineers I went to school with, a lot of the other people I went to school with, they really just lacked the skills, the hands-on skills to do that stuff, but then also just the knowledge, the design, visualization that you get from working with your hands, building something from a block of stock steel or aluminum or whatever the material is. And I always just kind of had an intuitive sense of that, or maybe not even that. I just always loved to build stuff.
Well, you seem to know, I was fortunate to kind of interact with you a little bit while we were producing and creating our film, The Cookie Cutter. And you lent us like a homemade motion control system for just a couple of shots of our film, which thank you very much. I'm so excited that I was able to kind of show my team how to run that. And you even gave a tutorial. It seems like you do have, now what I consider a more rare skill than most have is not only hands-on experience, but you have a calculating mind. You understand. Are you a numbers person? Are you a math person? Is that kind of like a natural inclination for you?
Yes, but numbers to be used just to be applied to a real world problem. It's almost more geometry. It's strange, like when you're in a machine shop, like numbers and addition, subtraction, division are really important. Geometry is really important, but then like calculus is not. I mean, calculus is an amazing thing, and I love it, and I wish I did more with it. But the math that I need to build hands-on things is the math that I'm best with, and that's the math that I use from day to day, and just So I wouldn't describe myself completely as a numbers person, but the numbers of like measurements and cutting an inch into 64ths, a quarter, an eighth, a 32nd, because that's the thicknesses that all the stock metal comes in, the fasteners, everything. So those numbers, and then just geometry, trigonometry, angles for just assembling and putting together devices. That's really what I do best, and that's why that's kind of part of the reason I got drawn into photography and filmmaking and animation. Is it is a very technical craft, and you never want to lose sight of the story that you're telling and just making beautiful images. You can also delve deeply into the technical side, and you can achieve amazing results with just really highly technical things. And it's very general and abstract, but it's just, you can make devices that move a camera in an amazing way, or can animate a creature or an object in really beautiful ways. And just, I think oftentimes like the technical aspect is you have to go deeply into it, but if you do it well, you come out the other side of this, deep, dark tunnel of numbers and concepts and just mechanical constructions, but you can pop out of the other side with an amazing result that ends up on film, or it ends up as like an animated sequence that kind of transcends all the numbers and the devices and the dry mechanical concepts, and just someone with no background in any of that can look at it, and I think just people and can just see something amazing and be amazed and taken aback. And I think that's, in a lot of ways, that's just people's. Lots of people say like, "Oh, I'm not a math person. I'm not a numbers person." Like, you may not be, but your brain still kind of is. So your brain sees something that's
it's really like not knowing how to get to point B. It's like you see a destination and you're not sure what the route is to go. And this is kind of like the discovery process,
Yeah.
It seems like not only the background that you have of being exposed to somebody who was hands-on, who even knew what a lathe was. I mean, which is a skill in a lot of people's lives. A lot of people aren't mechanically inclined or are able to work with their hands. But you also have a creativity that kind of comes through. It sounds interesting to me that even though you thrive in technical, hands-on, geometric environments and manipulating physical items to do what they want to do. I mean, Fabricated is mind-blowing. The backgrounds alone of the little animated gear parts, so cool. I mean, beautifully done. Such a wonderful, probably, representation of your thought process. But like that, you're now embarking on another project that you're estimating 10 years. Who knows what it'll be. But the idea is that it seems like you are also very imagination driven. Like you're talking about making a chess set as a child. You're also, it seems like you have these stories that you want to get out. I'm interested in knowing why all this mechanical inclination is lending itself to story versus, I don't know, architecture, engineering. It's like I don't know if you've had jobs in those realms, but why does it go towards stop motion filmmaking?
That's a good question. I mean, it's kind of like I was just saying before, the transcendence. I mean, you can get either by choice or just because you can get bogged down in these deep, dry mechanical concepts and numbers and everything. And but for me, it's always been a means to an end of like wanting to have the result of all that difficult mechanical construction or mathematical concepts or really dry technical matter, to have that all come together and make all that into something new, like have something new coalesce out of all those out of all the dry abstract technical concepts, have that kind of come together and build into a new life or a new world. It's still being a little abstract, but it's
like, have you like historically had stories in your mind that you wanted to tell, or do you get inspired? And like, just because like, a painter will tell their story with canvas and paint, you're telling your story with, machining. And now you're, from what I understand, you're embarking into casting and silicone and stuff like that, which is a new realm. So it's like, yeah.
Kind of. I mean, I'm not so much of a straight up storyteller, and I the hardest thing for me is to sit down with a pencil and paper and just write an amazing story, just doing that. For me, I mean, it's kind of like the materials themselves have a lot of the story to tell, can be used to tell the story. So
like, what's an example of something like that? Can you give me speak to something that did that for you? Or
I mean, just in Fabricated, I mean, I was building all these little creatures, and Fabricated was very much a creation myth. And the materials, I mean, there was one specific part in the story where the main character is going through, it's a world of copper, and copper as a material it's naturally occurring. Early man used to be able to pick up just pieces of raw copper laying on the ground. They could hammer it with a rock and make a bit of an edge that was a bit of a knife, but it never held an edge well. So they could kind of use it for hunting and cutting and stuff, but it wasn't the best material. But then brass, when they found, like, if you took a little bit of tin, which is another naturally occurring element, and alloyed it with copper, which is, you needed a very hot fire, but over thousands of years, early man figured this out, and then the result was brass, which is a much stronger metal, and could hold an edge much better, and that kind of allowed mankind to move into the golden age of bloodshed if you will, like either hunting and doing much better hunting, or
marking your claims, staking your territory, all that. Yeah,
killing each other, and like territorial, to onto the way to developing full scale war. So just things like that, like and when you show like the materials like signify an era. So like copper and brass are very much like steampunk, which is it's kind of like
it's like an attainable material for like easier manipulation. Is that like...
Yeah, and it also harkens back. I mean, now mankind has moved beyond brass into aluminum and steel, which are like the silver metals, and aluminum allows us to have airplanes, and steel allows us to have like much better cutting weapons and spaceships, and on. So like the copper and brass is more of a quaint technology. I mean, it is technology, but it's like, I think
it has a finite use in it for its purpose, and like it was kind of like the evolution, like fire begets, everything almost.
Yeah,
but you got to start with something, and that's where brass.
So it's almost like steampunk is like you want to limit yourself to this more innocent age of technology before aluminum and steel brought really like the full the full opening up of technology and technological possibilities.
So that's
so with me, like the materials have always been like a part of the story itself, and so that's why I just like using them like as the raw materials, or they're the just the junk in the background. Like, I mean, that's kind of the story of Fabricated. Fabricated is a world that starts off as kind of rusty, rotten jungle, and then copper getting slightly more designed and built, and then brass, and then on to like the silver metals, and then where like and in the background is slowly becoming like more and more technological and mechanical. But then also the stakes are almost getting higher, or just you can hurt someone with copper, you can maim them with brass, and steel allows you to like easily to keep going. It's this progression, and it's also accompanied by like a fall from innocence, which is kind of the story of mankind as well.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because honestly, your knowledge base and the way your mind works tells that story, and I've seen Fabricated several times. I love it. It's like I've always wanted to get into machining and armaturing, but you have such a knowledge of the materials and the history of the materials that really helps contextualize things. And I find it interesting. So like are you kind of saying that pre-steel, pre-silver metals that we had a kinder society, like the idea of steampunk being less aggressive and more science driven or technology driven, or just like like a more innocent time, as you say? Do you feel like there's an association with materials in terms of aggression? Like if we've never found the silvers, which would beget anything else, like, we get into like everything else, not to get too off, into the weeds here.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I guess, no, I certainly don't want to say, I mean, early humans were killing each other with rocks, and without the greatest of technology, we kind of early humans kind of chased down and killed what was left of the Neanderthals, which were so. No, I don't want to say that, but the technology does go hand in hand with like the ability to kind of I guess the scale. The scale of the, I mean, it's not only destruction. I mean, the technology also allows for amazing medical advances and social advances to artistic advances. So the technology is not always used for weapons and for doing bad. But I think, I mean, mankind has just become inextricably entwined with our technology, and our technology now pushes us in different directions that we would never have gone if that technology didn't exist. And in some ways, I mean, it's almost made the, you know, like kind of like push button warfare has almost made us like back to being like pleasant and agreeable with each other, because we can now like kill and maim at a distance or insult each other, you know, from like on the other side of the world with Twitter or something like that. But while we're sitting, like each of us sitting at home alone is all, you know, we're all very, you know, we're not being like aggro and mad. We've almost kind of returned to a more genteel way of living, while still being able to get out our aggressions through, you know, other ways, through other ways via this new technology. So it's, I mean, it's just, I mean, I think it's just a very much like we are just we build the technology and the technology shapes us. So, and who knows where any of that's going. But
right.
Like I mean, mankind is, I mean, we are stuck with it. I mean,
you can't unlearn.
We built it.
Right.
It's
I mean, unless we had such an apocalypse that we did go to a square one, which, I mean, right now, who knows where the world's going to go. But let's digress from that. That's really interesting. So, so then you've kind of come from the background, you go to school, and it sounded to me, when we've had past conversations, you went to Illinois and then you went to Northwestern, where you were working in a different capacity in a machine shop, but that's where maybe more of the drive to get into film and stop motion began. Is that correct? Or is that, or does it go back a little?
I mean, it was pretty much like having the machine shop to myself. I had been going that way. I made my very first stop motion animation film before I moved to Chicago. I was living in Florida, and happened to be in Florida when the first great wave of Super 8 enthusiasts was passing on. So the thrift stores in Florida had the best Super 8 cameras for $3 each. So I ended up with a really great selection. And this is before digital still cameras were a thing. So it was really, I mean, I knew I really loved animation and filmmaking, but old camcorders just didn't have either the image quality, but most importantly, like the ability to edit. Which
was this the era of the video toaster kind of? Like,
yeah, I know that was, yeah. I mean, that was a thing, but even back then, it was like to edit, you needed like 2 VCRs and had to like stop, record, and
3/4-inch decks and all that kind of stuff. And if you tried to use a you had to worry about the generation in which you recorded, because if you used one, then it would look crappier and all that stuff. Yeah.
And what you ended up with was just terrible. So anyway, I'm Super 8. I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, I have a bit of a film fetishist in me, and I'm sad to see film dying, which is what I mean. Like, everyone should just take this time to, you know, take a look around. Well, there's anything left of film, because in 10 years there'll basically be nothing left of it at all. But the great thing about Super 8 is it gave a good. I mean, it was very much fundamental filmmaking. I mean, it's a miniature version of what Hollywood was using at the time, in that, you know, you put the film in the camera, you clicked it. Once you clicked that button, that film was shot. You had to send it off to be developed. But when you got it back and it was good, I mean, you could look like that's, you just look at it, that's your image, and you could edit it. Like, you could just, you're still using like a little Super 8 viewer, and you're cutting it with a guillotine and
using the reel-to-reel, and we're using glue or tape, or
I was using both. I think glue. I think I liked using tape, because tape would give you like a good, clean edit.
Yeah.
That really, for me, was a great discipline of like, both when you're shooting, like, you just didn't waste it because it's film, and that, you know, you only had 3 minutes of film in the camera, and then it had to be sent off to Switzerland to be developed, and that took 3 weeks.
Wow.
And then when you got it back, like once you made the cut, I mean, you could kind of like splice a few more frames in there, but it was a really good way to learn to edit, just to really think about the edit in your head and like, what am I trying to do with this edit? Do I want it to be a really hard, fast, kinetic edit, or do I want it to like be kind of like a slower, more subtle edit that's just supposed to be like a seamless edit? I mean, is this action? Am I quickening the pace? And just I think those things come a lot more naturally to you if you're looking at the film, the strip of film, the little strips that you've put together, and holding it in your hand. And it also just got me to like envision the edit in my head a lot more.
What were you editing? What was the film?
I mean, I shot lots of Super 8. I shoot live action sequences with my friends. We'd get together, make little movies. I also shot lots of time lapse, and then I was also shooting my first stop motion thing. And this was it was these little machines I had kind of cobbled together from parts at another one of my jobs where they just had like lots of mechanical junk that I was bringing home. So it was similar to my more recent stop motion animations, just much more basic. But I was shooting that, and also, I mean, just with film, it's like it's a good way to the discipline of animating, just because it's like you press that frame button that takes one frame of film, and you just go to the next one. Like, you can't look at what you just shot. There's just and you're not going to see what you shot until that entire roll of film has been completed and sent off for processing. So it's really you learn to envision what you think you're getting, and then it's never the case that's what you're actually getting. But then when you see it, when it's been developed and you see it, then you can kind of reconcile those two in your head and be like, okay, I thought I had this amazing, really fast action thing, or actually, no, I thought I had this like nice, slow, graceful movement, and what I actually got was this like jerky, spasmodic, like robot.
It's funny. It's
the more that happens, the more you can reconcile in your head and get better at like how to set everything up to get what you have envisioned in your head, or realize the thing that you envisioned in your head wasn't going to work anyway, or was not possible to attain.
It's funny because my students, whenever I'm teaching them, I always tell them, I was like, right away, I'm going to tell you all have the gift of animating fast, So congratulations on that. Oh, by the way, I'm in a shared studio, so we'll hear some background noises here and there, but hey, how's it going? Okay. Good. Where was I? So yeah, I told my students, you all have the gift of animating fast, which I find interesting. I wanted to throw this at you. So with your background, knowing lenses, knowing learning the process, waiting 3 weeks and kind of going from there, digital comes along and it definitely gives stop motion artists immediate feedback, and even maybe teaches them a little bit of editing, prolonging frames, copying, pasting, and figuring out how you could cheat a little bit. I mean, whatever gets end result is the best way for the most part. But I remember I had the opportunity to talk to Ray Harryhausen many years ago, and he was always they were talking about the advent. This was around Video Toaster and things not quite going digital, but they were lending themselves that way. And I had asked him about that process, and he was just saying, I don't understand people who look backwards when they're animating. It's like I plan it out by frames and I go forward. He's like, going backwards isn't a part of my mindset. So I'm wondering, it's like how much digital is actually helping, because the other thing I will say, like digital might help you in the immediate with that immediate feedback to figure out your timing. But when it comes to lighting and lenses, which people would definitely benefit from getting a Bolex or some sort of camera in their hands and understand focal lengths and understand light and f-stops. That seems to be really on the fall off, and it's a technical art that seems to be more diminished. I think there's even more scholarships going out for cinematography now than ever before. Yeah. So I'm wondering, obviously everything has a balance, but what is your perspective on digital tools versus, advising somebody to get their hands on something film?
It's a good question. I mean, I also, just with the Super 8, I mean, I animated sequences with the lens cap still on, totally out of focus. Lighting was totally horrible. And just, I mean, those were days wasted that I would have been able to catch immediately if I was using digital. So I am really glad that I had that initial exercise to really build the discipline. But I think, I mean, on balance, I mean, I think digital is the way to go with stop motion. Certainly, now the danger is you spend way too much time looking at what you just shot, and there is something absolutely valuable to just, and it's a good exercise to do even with a digital camera, is just turn off the monitor on the playback and just animate an entire sequence without looking at it at all. Just animate, take the frame, animate, take the frame, animate, take the frame, and do a few seconds of animation like that, and then see what you got, and that will absolutely make you a better animator, even when you're still looking at the playback. And with all of that stuff, I mean, as far as cinematography, I mean, if you're using a digital SLR, all of the concepts that applied to film are still there. F-stop, exposure, and except you can see what you got immediately. I mean, I think the problem is just the kind of emergent effects of digital being so easy that, I guess there are a lot of cameras that aren't digital SLRs. You can just use a webcam or a GoPro or something, or just a frame, someone that's driving frames, and there's no real f-stop or depth of field or exposure time or any of that to worry about. So, and a lot of people do that just because it's the easiest way. It's very easy. You don't think about it. And then by not thinking about it over months and years, you kind of forget that option exists. If you do want to rack focus, it's like, I mean, rack focus is an amazing thing in stop motion, and
yes, you can do it in camera.
Amazing films. It's been used very well to just, I mean, it's almost like an editing tool of like shifting the audience's attention from this thing to that thing. But it's a bit of a technical thing, and you can't get it with a webcam. And so a lot of people don't know that it's even possible, or that it exists, or it's not a thing. Which is that is just one of the emergent things with digital technologies. I mean, just the ease of use lets a lot of other muscles go weak. And so
they never develop at all, because like I said, a lot of students, when I give them even a digital SLR camera, they don't know how to do anything with the camera. Everyone, like, this is a great time to learn to animate in terms of motion, it seems, but in terms of framing and staging and lighting, that seems to be I'll fix it in post philosophy. And I always tell people the phrase I'll fix it in post is for people who have time and money.
Yeah.
So like possibly learning this ahead of time, figuring it out, a little bit more planning rather than jumping in front of the camera. I mean, obviously jumping in front of and getting your hands on anything like you did with your film cameras, you learn through experience. But like in terms of advising younger people, it's like getting a hold of a camera, whether it be digital or manual, and understanding focal length, or understanding, just basic focus.
Yeah. And then that is a shame that's being lost. And then there's also the aspect of, the more that we see material that hasn't been shot with those techniques, the viewing public becomes less aware. Like the visual literacy. I mean, does the visual literacy get worse? I mean, I guess it might, but then when someone does see a follow focus, it's like, are they more amazed, or are they confused, or do they just kind of gloss over it because it's like it's not something they know how to do. So it is always hard to tell what the end result of all this stuff is, and then they just like the viewing, like what I mean, up to a recent point in history, I mean, like all these cinematographers knew, like, okay, like a very shallow depth of focus. It really concentrates the audience on the actor's eyes.
Yeah, the foreground elements. Yeah.
Yes, and there was just this whole film grammar, and that basically held for, from the 1920s and 30s up to the early 2000s. But now that just digital is coming in, and there's so many more different types of image capture. I mean, you can we see stuff that comes, I mean, in one day of watching television or watching streaming. I mean, you'll see stuff that came from 500 different types of cameras. And so I think that film grammar, that visual grammar, is both expanding and contracting at the same time. I mean, there's such a wider array of images that we're being exposed to, but that basic film grammar of like wide establishing shot and dissolve transitions, meaning the time is elapsing, and I think all
the
that
implication of film language, yeah, definitely. That most people don't even like cognitively understand, but they feel, yeah, like that slow dissolve means time is passing slower.
So like all those rules, like all those rules that as a cinematographer used to go by, and just the toolbox of things, those aren't as definite and locked down as they used to be. So I mean, that's we're losing one thing, but we're also gaining. It's meaning like there are more. It's like a wider vista opening up to make a new language, because I definitely agree. Like that film grammar was getting old, and it did. I mean, just anything that kind of codifies itself into just a rule book. It's good in that you can go through and you can teach it that way and you can learn it that way, but it also means that it's become fixed and stagnant. And then the thing with art and culture is just it is always evolving and changing, and it does naturally, and you want it to. So
where do you see then where do you see the future of stop motion going? One of the things I like about Leica is that it was interesting hearing a lot of the negative reviews for Missing Link, which, to be honest, outside of, in my opinion, Paranorman was probably one of the better told Leica stories. And I think I'm very much a story smith. I love storytelling, and I really break down story. It was definitely a pared down story, but I think that worked in their favor. But I digress. I'm talking about how they marry digital and then they would work with stop motion. The benefit of it being able to come from such a big fund to create these films is that kind of burst innovation, and also necessity burst innovation. So I'm wondering, especially you've even worked on like newer films, like the Star Wars films. You made armatures for that, and it has to emulate what's in the past. What is your philosophy of stop motion going forward in terms of technology, storytelling? Kind of a big bubble question.
Yeah, it is really difficult to say. I mean, I am impressed that stop motion has hung on and still is hanging on. I mean, for a while, like around the early 2000s, I mean, a lot of the people around the Bay Area that have been doing it for much longer than I have, they were sure it was done for. Like they felt like the late 90s, there was a whole bunch of work and it was the golden age. And then as digital kind of came along, they were sure it was just going to disappear completely and just be forgotten of, like the same way like optical printers have been forgotten and just.
And contextually, it's like, yeah, stop motion was used for effects. It was used, miniatures, explosions, in-camera effects that were supposed to be taken completely seriously. Now that you see them, they're a little bit more quaint. If you look at RoboCop, which I love, and I still love in-camera effects like that.
I think that's stop motion's strong. Like that. That's what's helping it survive. It's unmistakably human. It's unmistakably organic and handmade. Now some stop motion, like the really high end stuff, like the stuff that Henry Selick does, it's very smooth and polished. Leica somewhat, although Leica has their own way of making it look very just organic. But even at these like big productions, it's always a seesaw between like, oh, it's too polished, it's too smooth looking, or no, we want it to look more handmade. So they're always having that that tug of war. But and then to like a lot of the more independent stop motion, it's almost just by necessity, or just people don't have the skills or the budget to make something super smooth, which is to its credit. So it ends up looking very handmade, and I think that's its saving grace, in that you can watch it and just unmistakably be, even just subconsciously, even if you're not well versed on different film production methods and know what animation is, or CGI versus stop motion, I think people can just look at stop motion and just intuitively know, like, wow, that's like, there's something organic about that, even if they can't explain exactly why. And there's something, I mean, I think it's very endearing, like when you watch it. But
yeah, I feel like it harkens back a little bit to like when I was a kid, I would play with my action figures or dolls or however you want to call them. And there was a part of me that just wanted to step back and let them play and let me watch and drive the narrative.
Yeah.
And it's almost like that's where computer animation was becoming like a trend, because you could do something more easily and not deal with gravity. But like you said, it's unmistakably human. I think it comes from our innate nature of wanting to manifest our imagination into our surroundings and put that imagination in front of us, and share it with the world, because that's like the hardest thing, is getting whatever in your head into somebody else's purview and be like, this is what I'm thinking. So it's, the future of stop motion, which I always find interesting, is I think that, people say there's a resurgence because now it seems like we're on the other end of the digital seesaw, where people are getting a little tired of seeing the same type of clean animation, non-stylized, and maybe more experimental techniques. And I always cite like Spider-Verse was a good example of how using different techniques and also kind of going a little bit beyond that and showing what you can do is kind of breaking the mold of kind of what's been getting a little bit, in my opinion, mundane with computer animation.
Yeah, and a lot of computer animation, I think for the longest time, the holy grail was full absolute photorealism, and
especially hair. I remember hair.
And they've almost gotten there. But I think they also realized that, like, oh, we could get there, but that's not real. And it's not like we're going to get there and just like, okay, we've got the techniques, everything's perfect and amazing. I mean, I think a lot of, and then
it's like the discovery of the uncanny valley. Like I just watched the entire Star Wars series again, and one of my favorite of the newer films that is out was Rogue One, and the digital lieutenant, or the last scene with Leia.
And
I was watching it with my partner, who she was like didn't see that scene before, and her reaction's just like, what's wrong with her head? It's like you could try and make that human look, but it's like there's something just instantly repelling. Whereas like if you created it in stop motion, it's like, oh, I understand this,
And just, I mean, the thing that I tell myself it does get discouraging every now and then, because when you see, like, I mean, computers can do amazing things and they can do it really fast, and you can multiply them infinitely, and I mean, just a lot of times. But what I tell myself is that things created in CG they look worse each year. Like something that was shot 15 years ago in CG,
they just don't age well.
It doesn't age well, and stuff that is in stop motion is just, if anything, it'll look better every year.
Well, that's interesting because there are people who would make fun of some of the effects in Ghostbusters or Star Wars or Terminator or something like that because they're like, what is happening? But I do feel like even if I watch it now, there's a quaintness, but there's also like a creepiness. I mean, there's an inherent creepiness to stop motion.
Yeah. So it is hard to tell, and it's hard to explain exactly what it is. I mean, I think a lot of it does go to the subconscious, and sometimes it's hard for me to explain it because I'm intimately familiar with the process of achieving that look. So I can look at something I shot or someone else shot and just I evaluate it in the context of shooting stop motion or how well are they animating or this and that. The thing I have lost is the ability to just look at it with fresh eyes and be like, how did you do that? Like, how is that?
Yeah.
What is that? So, I mean, that is one thing you lose when you're
a filmmaker
on the side of creating it. But I mean, I've also had things like with people that looked at Fabricated, like, they're like, wow, how did you move that? I mean, they knew it was animation, but they thought it was full size. Like, how did you?
That was one of the first questions I think I asked you about Fabricated because I wanted to really know the scale. So, like as an example, your human character, how big was that?
He was 8 inches. I mean, standard doll puppet size, give or take.
And to work in all those elements, like the lungs and everything like that, on such like that's an 8-inch scale. It's like that's kind of standard. It's a little on the smaller side of standard, right?
Yeah, I mean, I find so many of the things I build are I'm just bumping up against the level of like, okay, this is the smallest screw available, and it's still a little too big. So I do tend to make things on the small side. Part of that is just space. I mean, it's like if that creature is that big, then the whole set behind it. If the creature is 20% smaller, then the entire set could be 20% smaller.
And you were doing all that in camera, right? Like those.
Yeah. I mean, all of Fabricated was shot in camera. I'm doing a little bit now with the spaceship flying. Like,
we were showing your composite process with green.
There's a little bit of green screen, but there's still a lot of that was shot in camera as well.
Right.
I mean, I try to stay away from too much green screen. But the thing with Fabricated was I specifically left out everything that would be a giveaway as to the scale. I didn't do that to confuse people about the scale, but I just did it to leave the universe completely
proportional. Yeah.
Completely, like, basically, I mean, to have nothing to grab. I wanted nothing from the here and now world to be visible. Although it was obviously it's a post-apocalyptic tale. It's all ruined machinery, so it's like, okay, this is the aftermath of some sort of civilization.
Kind of like with Mad God, if like there's a beautiful opening scene that goes forever, and you do see familiar items in that scene from different. I mean, it's to scale kind of to the world, but some things aren't. It seems like it's just like kind of put in there, which I really appreciate.
Yeah.
And it's like kind of interesting because you've worked with Phil Tippett on projects. Did you work on Mad God as well?
Yeah, I did. I did a fair amount of work, like building things, and then I animated a couple of shots, which was a great honor.
Yeah, that's amazing. And
just his process. I mean, I think Mad God for him was. I mean, he has his day job in his studio, which is that makes the money. But for him, I think Mad God was always just like a steam release valve of just like. He could just do whatever he thought up and whatever he wanted. And also just when he would have, I mean, he had a whole big rotating cast of volunteer people coming in. And it was always like, he'd kind of explain what he wanted and then just like walk away and leave me or whoever else with a big pile of stuff. And I'm like, it's like, it was always fun building stuff. I'd build it and I'd be like, is this what Phil wanted? And but I'd do as good a job as I could. And Phil would come back and look and be like, looks amazing, thank you. Like, and it's like, wow, like this isn't one of those, like a feature animation studio making a for-profit movie where they'll nitpick little things just just for the hell of it. So Phil's philosophy, certainly on Mad God, is like get people who know what they're doing and then just let them do their thing, and just and kind of like open the process up to like accidents and happenstance and things. I mean, he does control. He's very controlling about certain elements, but then other elements he'll let them. And I think Phil's been doing this long enough to know like how to strike that balance.
Well, it's interesting because my favorite. So I've directed for theater and stage and film and everything. And what I find about the collaborative process, especially those who are capable and passionate, is that whatever I might have in my mind, even what I think is, if I wrote it and this is how I think it should go, when it's presented to me through the eyes or the mouth or the animation of someone else, I am like brought to an area that I never would have thought of. And I'm so pleasantly surprised that it becomes not just what's in my mind, but this collaborative experience, and it has a life of its own. Yeah. So that's what I really appreciate about all kind of collaborative storytelling. I know we have to wrap this interview up pretty quickly. And honestly, I would love to set up a part 2 because I have like a lot of questions for you.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions. First off, it's like, so what, like, do you have like a set of influences that really propelled you into stop motion? Like whether it be like a film you watched or even today, things that you would say, oh, you should watch this, whether it's live action with cinematography or stop motion film. What kind of influences do you have for film?
Let's see. Very early on, there was a film, The Secret Adventures of Tom Thumb, that came out in the mid-90s by the Bolex brothers.
Do you have that armature, or did you recreate that armature?
No.
No. I saw on your website that you had a Tom Thumb, so I was wondering, is that from The Secret Adventures of Tom Thumb? Because there was brass in it, and it seems like you work a little bit more exclusively in steel.
Boy, I'm not sure exactly which armature you're talking about. Was it, Brad? Let's see. Tom Thumb.
It says miniature armature. I'm just looking at your website. Miniature armature, tool, steel, brass, 7 centimeters high, and then you're holding the little armature in your hand.
It's a tiny little thing that fits in my hand?
Yeah.
But it's steel.
It says tool, steel, and brass. Like I could tell that you have some. It looks like there might be some brass tie down for the feet.
Oh boy, I'm still not getting a picture of exactly which armature. That could have been an armature built for some other production.
Here, I'm just going to pop this up on.
Oh, okay. No.
Okay.
Yeah, boy. That job never happened. Whatever that was built for never happened. I believe that was a video game thing that they were. Oh boy. Yeah, no, I like that one because that was like the smallest armature I had built. And I always wanted to build one of those on my own. No, boy, I don't even remember exactly. That was like a paid job that they bought the armature, but the thing never happened.
But kind of going back to the film influences then. So you're definitely saying, like, I love Secret Adventures of Tom Thumb. Very great.
Yeah, that one really hit me. I'm never good at these influences questions because I have to think for like half an hour, and then at the end of that, I'm like, okay, I got the perfect list.
I'm bad at lists too, but sometimes like whatever comes out is almost like, oh, that's an interesting thing because birthing people's research of films that they may not have seen.
Yeah. And also, it's just, like now, like under lockdown and under full just pure streaming input. I've been going and digging through and just like finding things. And it is the thing with influences. It's just like I'll watch something and I'll just be like, if it's something I really like, if it's a comedy and I'm working on a stop motion project, it's like, I gotta find a way to, I gotta make the writing, I gotta find a way to make it a little funnier. Yep. Or I'll watch an action, I'll watch, like a Tsui Hark, like Hong Kong action flick, and just be like, man, like that editing, those fight editing sequences are just so fastly and kinetically edited. Like, I want to do that. Like, I have to make my cuts faster. Gotta like make the action just like strong, like well silhouetted, strong action, and just like fast and like fast cuts, and really like hard edits. And then I'll watch like a drama and just be like, I want to have a scene where it's just like really just like the stop motion puppet is just like crying and just tearing his heart out.
Got a lot of beautiful dramatic motion moments out of your characters in Fabricated. It's interesting the empathy you feel for these.
Yeah, and that worked. Like I shot it. I actually, I mean, this is the way that it ended up. I started shooting it at 30 frames a second just because.
You want to smoother, like
at that time, I didn't even know. I mean, I thought 30 was like the standard thing, and this was back when we didn't know what the standard was going to end up at. And then for a while, I wasn't even really. I mean, it was part of the otherworldliness. I wasn't even too concerned with having it match any specific baseline, so I was kind of just animating like free range, like just without real hard reference. And at the end, it ended up being like a slower animated thing than. I mean, sometimes I wish it would go a little faster, just because I mean, at times it's a slower movie, and people watching animation often just want something faster or shorter. Right. But I think it works with the world, and just like it lets you like kind of lets the world seep into the viewer and kind of take it in, because it's everything in that is so otherworldly that it's like if it was just fast action, that almost
exhausting. Yeah,
the fast kinetic action, it's good to like when the tempo of the scene is changing, and that's what I do. When it gets into the final climactic robot versus dinosaur fight, like the tempo increases quite a bit, but even the tempo is something that's almost like recognizable. It's like, okay, this is an action fight, and I've seen a million action scenes and fights in movies, so I know this. So I didn't want to edit the rest of the film like that, or just animate it in that way. So it's a slower cut tempo that just makes the viewer concentrate on the world and what's in the frame, and didn't want to use the editing too much to tell the story. I mean, like the pure editing is a very useful tool. I mean, it can like be like, I mean, here's what you're supposed to look at in the frame. Here's how you're supposed to feel. Here's what's about to happen. I tried not to do too much of that, right. Just because it's, I mean, like I said, I wanted everything in this world to just be basically unrecognizable. And that was
definitely achieved it, man. It's like
I did achieve that. I mean, and sometimes, I mean, I will say like I might have gone a little bit far in that, because it is really important to. I did start out wanting to make that. It's just that's where I was in animation. Like I had watched a lot of, and was inspired by just a lot of like experimental animation, and like obviously I can't finish this interview without mentioning the Quay brothers. And I also have to say, like I did develop a fair amount of my aesthetic and style before I'd ever seen them, so I wasn't, because if you look at them and look at Fabricated, it's like, oh wow, he did a really good. He just like ripped off everything they did. But
I think, I mean, there's a feel definitely that equates, but yeah, what you brought to it, I mean, that's.
And then when I saw their stuff, it was just like, it just filled me with like, wow, like there is like, here's someone else that is doing that same thing, and just, but they went, it feels like they just went all the way. But their stuff is quite inaccessible, and like there was other. I'm trying to think of some other names, but when I started making Fabricated, I wanted to make it as obscure and inaccessible as possible. And then a little bit before halfway through, I started to realize, like, no, like there is a story I'm trying to tell here, and I need to do a better job of telling it, and not just keep obscurity on top of obscurity just to make this what is an alien world to make this as confusing and as alien as possible.
Well, especially like you have it is a narrative driven story, but you can see it as being a lot of abstract beauty. And the thing is, if you're like tying into your audience with through a narration, you got to let it ring true. And like even being so focused, which I wouldn't even realize, and I'm going to watch your film again, is like making sure things are scaled to the universe, because audiences are smarter, and whether they realize it or not, something can pull them out of the story and be like, all right, I'm done with this movie. And they might not even know why. And if you were kind of bringing things in there that were either confusing or not true to what you were trying to put forth, if they're narrative people, then they're going to be like, all right, I'm done with this. So yeah, like being very, it seems like it's like overall, you're a very intentional, and I don't want to say calculated, because that sounds negative, but you are a calculated, intentional stop motion artist. And even like right now, you're talking about this space film where you're learning about casting and molding and kind of doing that entire process. You were mentioning a little bit earlier about how you are working with Victoria Rose on or she's kind of helping you, like kind of figure out some things. And that's a very calculated part of stop motion as well. Casting is a big deal.
I mean, the stuff I do is very technical, and it's another tug of war of like, I mean, I relish the technical challenge of, making a set of 3D printed replacement faces, and like I had never done that before, and that was fantastically difficult, and just it's an achievement for me just to have like gotten the library of faces together. And then just some of the armatures I build, I mean, when I'm designing it, I'm like, what's the most difficult thing I could possibly do? Well, let me try to do that, just because that's how I do it. But it is, and then on the other side of just like, there's a big like world of like dead trees, and just I have piles of like dead lumber and dead wood, and just like building it into this chaotic world that doesn't seem like anything makes sense in this world. So it's a back and forth. And I mean, it's kind of like where there is no answer to it. And there is no, I mean, when you get the balance right once, it never stays that way, because you have to continue making the film. So that's, I mean, I'm kind of happy being just like tottering from one end to the other. But it is, I do have to fight against making it too technical and too dry. And I mean, I'm storyboarding more than I used to do, but even that, like, I mean, this isn't live action. You're not just running and gunning, but
it's almost like if you're going to be storyboarding, I mean, the planning process, since stop motion is very intentional, it's like you can't shoot a scene per se and throw it away. I mean, it's happened. You definitely on the cutting.
So maybe you might move it to another part or cut it down, or it's just, I mean, even if you have a storyboard, like don't treat that as like an absolute like Bible, like this has to be stuck to. It's like if in the middle of a shot, and I've been in the middle of animating a shot, which takes 10 hours, so you have lots of time to think. And in that 10 hours, I've gotten a better idea. And that better idea usually means like, okay, that's a couple more weeks of work, but just once you have that idea, you can't, and it's a good idea and it seems to work and solve a lot of the problems you had before. It's like, I usually can't let go of it. And I usually take the time to go down that path. And it's usually,
it's almost like shooting film, you shoot it, you wait the 3 weeks and you have all that time and you're like, oh, now that I got it back, it's like, is it worth the effort to?
It is really important. I would say like, if you can just, if you can take time, like you've built this thing in your head, like your brain will just turn the gears. It's like it's the learning curve. Like your brain will just figure things out, but you have to give it some time, and and then the answer will just kind of like magically appear in front of you. But I have got to go.
Thank you very much for being a part of this. And
thank you. You said this could go on for hours. You're right. I didn't think it could, but it could.
Yeah, I know, like we have a time constraint. If you're ever interested in coming back and talking, because I have a bunch of more questions about what you're doing, your process, your space, and all that kind of stuff. But let's put a pin in that. And just right now, thank you very much for being a part of the interview. And I will definitely follow you on social media and keep abreast of what you're doing with that the untitled spaceship type of film. Looks really cool.
Truly.
Yeah.
Super. Thank you so much. This was an honor.
Thanks, Brett. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.